Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate. Farmers in this country have been manning the barricades the past 3 days, blocking motorways. In one case, they even let pigs loose in a supermarket in the southwest of France. Also, access to one of the premier tourist sites in this country, the Mont Saint-Michel monastery. And they're doing it because of the free-falling prices of milk and beef. And with us to talk about it are Rudy Rittenberg of the Bloomberg News Agency from Brussels, Geneviève Savigny of the Confédération Paysanne Farmers Union, with us from her home constituency in Normandy, at the heart of where those protests have been happening, Nathalie Goulet, French senator, and joining us as well on set, Eric Martin, who is the founder and president of AgroStratégie and Perspectives, AgroStrategy and Perspectives, a consultancy that works both here and in Brussels. We were talking about what was undercutting the French globalization. Rudy Rittenberg, you were mentioning to us that you talked about New Zealand.
I was pointing out that the pain of French farmers, which is real, is nonetheless relative. If you look at a country like New Zealand, which gets a tremendous amount of its export earnings from dairy, and which has really suffered from the Chinese slowdown in demand, and the Kiwi, the New Zealand dollar, is down 25% in the past year. I mean, their economy has taken a tremendous hit.
All right, so milk, a victim of globalization, and we've seen some of the blame, as we were mentioning, leveled at the supermarket chains. Others in this country are blaming the Germans. Their prices are lower, their labor law and tax laws are laxer, and it's brewing resentment on this side of the Rhine. It's a report by partner station France 2, read by Ellen Gainsford.
A giant carousel in this German farm helps to milk more than 100,000 cows. Robotics and industrialized methods. This is how Germany has overtaken France in the beef industry. In 2010, the French milk industry was worth 7.8 million euros. Less than Germany at 9 million euros. In this farm, an hour and a half from Berlin, ultra-modern technology is in use. Here, cows are kept permanently in stalls. It's quantity over quality. In France, it's the opposite. Cows are left free in the open air. A contrast in conditions that's even bigger in pork farming. The pig farmers in France sell their pork at almost the same price as the Germans. The difference comes after leaving the abattoir. When the pork becomes processed, the price again goes up, 12 euros per kilo for France and 8 euros for Germany, making the German meat much cheaper and so more exportable. How to explain such a big gap in competitivity? The answer's in this abattoir. The workers filming here with their mobile phones are Romanian, Bulgarian and Polish. Workers without a contract, who until last year didn't have any minimum wage. A practice that is regularly denounced by the beef industry in France.
Eric Martin, is it unfair competition from the Germans?
Yes, it's more competitions. It's very different for the competition.
But is it unfair? Is it unfair?
It's unfair. Yeah. And the difference is the social price in Germans. The real difference. In Germany, we can workers from Poland, from Czechoslovakia, and another can work in the manufactory. In French, it's not real the models, and it's very different the cut of productions. And but I don't know if it's a real goal for the French farmer. Because we produce different products in France, but we respect the animals, we respect the environment, we respect the social peoples, and so on. So it's a real difference about the real economic system.
So, Senator Goulet, what should be done?
Well, first of all, it's a full dumping. I mean, we have like in industrial dumping, you know, for the salary, for the regulation, for environment regulation, for welfare of animals. Everything has to be included and increase the prices of the production in France. So if the country, the neighbor country, is not applying the same regulation, we're in a full dumping. It's easy to understand. So we need a regulation on the European Union, and it's really not the time to sign any agreement of free trade with the United States. Absolutely not.
Rudy Rutenberg?
Well, certainly there are a lot of questions to be asked about TTIP, and you know, I'm not the one to answer that. That's for the European Commission to do. It's clear that certainly on agriculture there will be great differences to be bridged.
But the differences are not just between, in that free trade deal that's being negotiated between the US and European Union. The difference is between neighboring states, between France and Germany.
Yeah, I would like to make a little note to that, because I was in the Netherlands a week ago where I spoke to a few dairy farmers, and some of these people have very modern operations, water beds for the cows, ventilators to keep the stables cool, and they're milking with robots. And a robot can only milk about 60 cows a day, so it's not like that will result in large industrial farms. And these are people that farm 120 cows there, and they graze their cattle, so, and nonetheless they are able to produce at a lower price than some of the French farmers with farms of similar size.
All right, the report there said that the French cows graze in the open air. Of course, that's not always the case. The law limits the size of dairy farms to 500. One farm in particular in the Picardy region, north of Paris, has been making headlines, the so-called 1,000 cow farm, which has been drawing a lot of anger, including from your organization, Geneviève Savigny. And let me just ask you, when you look at farms like this one, which, by the way, doesn't have 1,000 cows, but 796 at the last count at the start of the month, what is the solution in terms of, on the one hand, competing with the rest of the world, and on the other hand, making sure that everybody's playing by the same rules when it comes to how you raise cattle?
Yes, well, I think we've got to make things clear that what happens, this competition is the same everywhere, all over the world, and it's not French against German. It's one model, industrial model, against farmers, against peasant model. And so we've got to also remind that at the world level, it's only 10%, or globally about 10% of milk and other goods that are being exported. All the rest is produced and sold locally. And we should focus on this production and not put everybody out of business because of this 10%. And we are trying to set this kind of 1,000 cow as a model. It should not be a model at international level. We should also think that 70% of the food in the world is produced by small farmers, by peasants.
So Geneviève Savigny, how do you do it then? How do you make small farms sustainable and competitive in the face of something like the 1,000 cow farm?
Why do we have to be competitive, first of all? And second of all, why is this type of model competitive? Because they concentrate all the subsidies, they concentrate all the policies in their favor. And what we want is policy that goes for farmers, that go for family farmers, for peasants, in order to them to be not competitive means nothing. What we want to do is to be able to have local, regional markets and to have to go into the process and to reach the consumers. This is what we need, and that is what we are fighting for every day at the European, French, and every level, so that this also consumers have to know what do they want as farmers. It's also a debate that we are not having at the European level, and neither at the French level. What farming do we want? This 1,000 cow is really an example of what we don't want in France and what we don't want in Europe. But the government is not very keen on taking a real position. And we've seen him hesitating, saying, oh, this is not our model. But then we don't have really strong position of the government on which model of agriculture they want to promote. Because promoting the global model is not just a hazard, it's not chance, it's also a choice, a political choice. And this is also something we can oppose. And the government can also oppose.
All right, Eric Martin, Geneviève Savigny, they're mentioning the S word, subsidies, saying Europe has this crazy system where, what is it, 38% of the budget goes for farm subsidies, and the bigger your farm, the more subsidies you get.
I know, it's the models in the CAP. So
can that ever be changed? Is it mission impossible changing that?
We need to be changed, but we need to develop our farmers and the models. We need to have a view for the future of the farmers. We need to explain our farmers what can we do with them. And I think.
But whose job is it to help farmers modernize?
I think the models of farmers, it's for the local production, for the local consumers, for the local market, and so we don't need to change that because there's more business competitive, and the consumers are very educated, and the consumers like to drink the milk where they come from, they live near the country, and so. But in France, we have a strange country because we have more regulation about the agriculture and another regulation about the health agriculture, health consumers. We explain every day in the consumers, we don't need to eat more beef because it's not very good for your health. You don't need to drink more milk because it's not good for your health. And you don't need to drink a wine because it's not very good for you'll be alcoholic in the future. It's very strange. In France, the consumers says, I want to help the farmers. We want to buy the French production and so. But my medicines, my government said, don't drink too more, don't eat too more because we are so fat, we are not a good health. It's very strange in France, but a really good, very strange country.
All right, there is this issue of consumers. Let me first put it to you, Nathalie Goulet. When you go to the local supermarket in Normandy. How much of the produce comes from the locally grown stuff? Is it easy to find?
More and more. More and more. We had a very short network from the producer to even the retailer and the supermarket. They are working together. We also have milk coming from the place and cheese, and everything is coming very, very close. We have this short network, absolutely. But I would like to underline that if we miss this market now, milk and cattle, half of the world is right now starving. And one of a sudden, we will need this production. And we need to organize it. But I would like also to underline that our farmers are very involved in the protection of environment, on their life on the field, and they are absolutely knowledgeable. You know, we have now a lot of agriculture school and factories. They are training all along life. You know, we are not in the farm of 19th or 20th centuries. They all jump in the 21st century. We cannot speak about the farmer as they were 20 years ago. It's something different. They are really businessmen, industrial, and they love their work.
Rudy Rittenberg, how would you rate the French on that score when it comes to the French farmer, when it comes to...
I think it depends on the region. Certainly in Brittany, we've seen some problems with nitrogen pollution and dead zones in the marine waters off
polluted water.
Basically fertilizer flushing out from the manure and from basically not being absorbed in the soils and flushing out into the watercourses and into the sea and causing these algae blooms that we've seen. So certainly one could question whether that is good husbandry.
And what about the consumers? Today, the French cabinet talked about plans to help the French to eat French, as they say. Yes.
I think it's a good idea, and certainly France has great quality.
But don't the French already eat French?
The French already eat a lot of French. That's absolutely true. But if you look, for example, at butter imports into France, they're tremendous. France actually imports a lot of butter, despite having such great butter itself. And France imports other dairy products as well, including powder.
Mm-hmm. Imports powder.
Yes.
Geneviève Savigny, on that score, again, what's the solution? Well, you were mentioning the consumers earlier.
I think we've got to change Yes, yes, but I think we've got, yes, the consumer, of course, has its part, because he's the one who does the shopping, but also the one who can influence his local authority to buy local for the children at school and for hospital and so on. So we have public procurements that can be a good mean to buy local and to help local farmers.
Public
but we
procurements,
also
but
have consumers, of course, buying.
I was saying public procurements, but you know the state coffers. Right now, there's a big budget deficit, so I don't know if you could subsidize it.
Well, again, there is a political choice to subsidize actors, and we could also subsidize farmers, consumers, good consumption for consumers. So again, it's a political choice. I know we are not going to change now. We're in the middle of the crisis, but when we are in a crisis, we can think ahead and think. Now we're in trouble. Why are we in problem? Why are we having problem, and what can we do? So this is why I'm putting on the table solutions for after tomorrow. I know that for tomorrow there will be big problem, and we have to have helps for bank, for
to avoid bankruptcy.
Everything you have when there is a crisis, but. To avoid bankruptcy and exactly for farmers to face all the expenses and things like that. But this is not a long-term solution. The long-term solution has to be thought about now, and what we see for our organization is that we've got to change our way of thinking, not to think global market first and competitiveness. For me, this is the path. This is not the 21st century. This is the 20th century. Now, the 21st century, we are facing a global warming crisis, social crisis, and agriculture can provide jobs and can provide good food. So we have to focus on this, producing food for consumers and take care of the planet.
All right, but that brings up, Geneviève Savigny, I guess what you might call a politically unpopular suggestion. Do consumers pay too little for the food that they eat? Remember, after the Second World War, we didn't pay very much when it came to housing. Instead, we paid a lot for, 40% of a household budget at the time was for food. Now it's kind of the other way around, where the budget of a household on food has dropped to something like 15%. Is it simply that the consumer just wants food to be cheap?
It's
Yes, I don't know if it's my point to answer, but yes, consumers want cheap food, but also, again, I go back to these policies and to the CAP, which has been just reformed in a way that doesn't change a lot. But the thing is that a lot of money goes to the big producers and doesn't help, for instance, producers of vegetables or producers of local goods. And so if we change the way we organize the policy, we could have not so expensive food for consumers. But of course, there is also an education for consumers to pay fair prices. But in the situation as it is, I know it is very difficult to know exactly what is the cost of production of products, because of course, between the consumer and the producers, there are so many intermediaries that people don't know exactly what's in the product that they buy. So it's not only their fault. But
right, so
of course, it's also their responsibility.
Let me bring this up with Rudy Rittenberg here. Is it the consumer's fault? Do they pay too little for what they eat? Is it the supermarket's fault? Is it the fault of the wholesalers? Is it the fault of the people who transform the food?
Well, this is one of the criticisms of the French farmers, that the government has privileged the retailers as a way to boost purchasing power. And this is a personal view. I do think that we pay too little for food because agricultural production and food production has many secondary costs that we may not integrate. But I do think there is a role also for the industry to improve the money that the consumer will pay for a product. Again, referring back to the Netherlands, they have a program for pastured milk, so milk of cows that have been grazing at least 80% of the time, and the cooperatives pay more for this milk, and the consumers pay a premium for this milk, and you will find it everywhere in the supermarkets, and people buy it. So there is a role for an industrial organization as well there.
Nathalie Goulet, is the food we eat too cheap?
Now, first of all, we have a lot of intermediaries now, and it's a proof that too big is not beautiful. Big is not beautiful, you know, because you have intermediary now. In the past, you have a lot of slaughterhouse almost everywhere. The people, they collect their cattle and go to slaughterhouse close to their farm, and then they distribute that to the supermarket or whatever, to retailers. But it was close and close, you know. Now you have to make 200 kilometers to have slaughterhouse. And so I think that we also have to think about the organization of the network. But to come back to your subject and the quality, I think that the consumer has to know where the food is coming from, which kind of product. If you are eating cheese with a Chinese milk, it has to be written on it. The consumer has to know where the food is coming from. And that is also one issue. We voted a law under Benoît Hamon that increase the level of labelization of the product. I think it's important that the people are fully aware about what they are eating. And then is their choice.
Eric Martin, is it changing the whole habits of consumers, changing the way that the food from the cow to the dinner plate is organized? Is it a losing battle?
It's a good question. So, in my view, we need to create a patriotic act about the consumers. It's really important. Because
at the European level or at the French level?
French level, at the first time, because I'm French. So we need to defend my farmer. I think if we explain in the consumers where the production comes from, who is making the production, where the products, when they cap to find the local production, if everybody explains that, the consumer can change, and the consumer like to buy, to eat a local productions, because it's more efficient for them. It's more to respect the criteria of environmental system, and the people would like to accept that. But the problem is the price. How do they how much they can do to buy a beef for the local production? I think the future is to explain that to the consumers and to the farmers, and to create a link, a network for the farmers and the consumers.
All right, buy French, says Eric Martin. We're going to leave it there. I want to thank you for joining us. I want to thank as well Rudy Rittenberg, Nathalie Goulet for joining us from Normandy, from her home constituency, and from Brussels, Geneviève Savigny. Thank you all. Stay with us, though. Our Media Watch segment is next. And we say hello to James Creedon.
Evening, Francois. Lots online about the topic of the debate this evening. In fact, it was on the front pages of the papers this morning. That's an example of the left-leaning daily Libération. Who is stuffing their face is the translation of that headline. So you couldn't really...
They always put a pig when they do that.
Right. You couldn't escape images on French rolling news channels as well. These are screen grabs from...
Oh, we were talking about this in the southwest of France.
That's right. Some pigs running amok, I think you could say, in
having a pretty good time by the looks of it.
Absolutely. So they were on TV screens, front pages of newspapers everywhere. This is a cartoon on the Huffington Post French edition. And what they're talking about here is short-circuiting or getting around the intermediaries or the middlemen. In other words, this chap here...
A shorter trip from exactly what Eric Martin was talking about. A shorter trip from the field to the dinner plate.
That's right. So with his baguette here, he has a live pig. So I'm not sure how they're going to manage that in the kitchen, but it's back to basics, I suppose you could say. Others writing opinion pieces. Marc Dorel, he founded a local produce organisation called the Four Seasons, and he's critical of, this is a letter, essentially an open letter to the Agriculture Minister, Stéphane Le Foll, where he's saying, look, for 5 years, we in Rennes, which is in Brittany, have been trying to set up a supermarket, essentially, which cuts out the middleman, and we've had no political support whatsoever. So the political support in France seems to be for the large supermarkets over local produce being put directly in contact with the consumers.
Rudy Rittenberg, on that point, the French government accused of not having this big conversation about agriculture. Will the last 3 days change things?
Well, that's exactly one of the criticisms that has been made after the proposals that were made this morning and this afternoon, is that there is not much in there that really prepares French agriculture for the long term.
Right. In any case, online you can see that organisations such as the Four Seasons are organising with Facebook pages, Twitter, etc., trying to put farmers directly in contact with consumers and to cut out the middleman, so to speak. That's one such Facebook page. Indeed, and people on social media encouraging each other as well to buy vegetable baskets, which is, I know from even friends in Paris, that this is something that is getting more and more popular. People buying local produce grown in the, speaking of vegetables in any case, grown in the Ile-de-France region around Paris. Better quality, better taste, says this tweet here, fewer pesticides, and it supports the local economy. So a lot of people supporting those ideas. Others in a more perhaps straightforward manner, just supporting the plight of the livestock farmers themselves. Je suis éleveur, I am a livestock farmer, or indeed I am a farmer, quite simply. So some people, I suppose, perhaps not getting into the nitty-gritty, but just supporting the plight of those in this situation. One theme that has made a comeback on social media as well is the so-called bonnet rouge. Now, these were protesters in Brittany last year. Francois, you'll remember
this
well.
This is a trucker strike, though.
That's
it's
right.
A little bit different.
It was indeed different, but it was to oppose, as you remember, the environmental tax, which was affecting truckers amongst others. But it, I suppose, raised the spectre, for central government at least, of local interests and local sort of calling for people to rally behind the Breton flag. So that has indeed emerged, seeing as a lot of the pork farmers, in fact, are overwhelmingly Breton. So we've seen a return of the red hats, the so-called bonnet rouge.
All right, appealing to France's peasant heritage. Many thanks, James Creed. And I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.